First thing, remember we've still got 10% off on our website. If you're buying any games on Switch, you can save some money by buying your eShop vouchers over there using code SwitchUp. Hi everyone, and welcome back to my favourite series on the channel. It is All Patched Up, where we go back and look at a few games that weren't perfect at launch and have received a few patches to see how much they've improved. In today's episode, we'll look at the Dying Light update patch. Pokemon Arceus has also received a big update since it released. Disco Elysium, a massive one as well. Ys 9, which had a lot of performance issues around the towns. Surviving the Aftermath has seen a few updates since that launched. And then finally, Apex Legends, which seemingly gets updated on a weekly basis. Have these games been all patched up? Well, let's find out. Let's begin then with Dying Light. Now, when this came out on the Nintendo Switch, we were really impressed with the efforts that Techland had gone to make sure that it generally ran really well. Unfortunately, at launch, they decided to uncap the frame rate. If you're not aware, this essentially means that the frame rate can fluctuate. It could go anywhere from 30 to 60 to anywhere in between and even below that. The problem with an uncapped frame rate is it's very obvious to the human eye when these frames are jumping all over the place, and it can make the thing feel much more stuttery than it actually is. In our review, we mentioned that it would be a very good idea for them to lock that to 30 frames per second, and that's exactly what they've done with the latest patch. As you can see, it's much more stable, and having that sitting at 30 almost 95% of the time means that the whole experience is just more enjoyable to play. Frame delivery, known as frame pacing, is also slightly improved. If this is inconsistent, it can give the image quite a jittery or stuttery appearance, even if the frame rate's quite high, but that's much better. I believe they use a proprietary engine here. This isn't like Unreal Engine 4. I think this is something that Techland have worked on themselves, and I've said it a few times now, when a developer has that or a publisher has that, you tend to get much better performance and a generally better image quality. Dying Light is very impressive. Anti-aliasing is also good. There's no jaggy edges on items. Shadow quality is decent, but the thing that impresses me the most is the draw distance. There are so many games where the draw distance is appalling, but here you can see a great distance and there are loads of zombies on screen animated at the same time. So overall, for an all patched up, this I would say is about as good as it gets. However, and this is the big thing, they had real problems with their online cooperative matchmaking. This still isn't perfect. It's much better than it was at launch. Generally, you could join up to 2 or 3 of your friends in co-op, but sometimes it would just crash the game completely. This still isn't quite where I would like it to be. However, it has seen definite improvements since the game first came out. A good effort, still a little bit more to do. As you know, people weren't very impressed with the visuals of Pokemon Arceus. I personally don't mind the way it looks, like this is a low poly art style, but I do mind how bad the pop-in is. Pop-in is, well, it's terrible, isn't it? You'll see everything from Pokemon, trees, leaves, grass appearing right in front of the camera. When we go side by side with the old and the new, has it improved a great deal? Well, potentially the resolution might be slightly improved, the image looks a bit crisper, but as far as the draw distance, it's still not perfect, let's be honest. However, the frame rate is a little bit more consistent than it was before. This again is another game that's completely locked out now to 30 FPS. It will experience a few dips, but generally the frame pacing keeps everything looking nice and smooth, and perhaps that draw distance is actually a bit improved over the original. See what you think. It is quite strange that the sky is the best looking thing in this game though, isn't it? And those skies, lovely. I absolutely loved Disco Elysium. It's probably in my top 1 or 2 games of all time, but the launch on Switch, performance wasn't great. Now, it was really interesting actually. They've worked with a number of patches, but the most recent patch has significantly improved the experience. Firstly, and most important for this game, are the load times. Load times went from 20 to 40 seconds sometimes, to only a few seconds transition between most areas. The Whirling in Rags, that's one of the places you'll visit most often, still has the worst performance. It's something about the disco lights. Maybe it's all just a bit too disco, but that causes the frame rate to stutter inside there, whereas everywhere else, especially outside in Martinez, it's much better than it was. The way that they did that, well, they actually removed, in the original release, you could pan the camera out so far that you could see the entire island. They actually capped that at set limits. You can only pan out so far, which realistically in terms of a gameplay made no difference at all, but massively improved the amount that they had to render, making it perform much better. Another big gripe that I had with the game was the audio. There were many stutters. It's not entirely fixed. There's still one weather condition. I think it's snowy. When you're outdoors in a certain location, the crackles will come back in. But generally, it's improved and is certainly better than it was when the game first launched. It's something that needs to be just right, because this is a 20 out of 20 soundtrack. And with that vocal and the spoken narration over the whole thing, it has to be just right. So yeah, it's much better than it was at launch. I may even go back and amend some of the scores in the original review, because it's a game that I think everyone should play. Surviving the Aftermath. Now, this was a strategy experience which we did a sponsored video for, but we never got round to putting a full review out. My main issue with the game, as it's a strategy, it's slightly slower paced, was the texture quality. Some of the textures are just diabolical. Has it improved? Well, side by side, I guess, will tell us, and you can let your own eyes be the judge. It may have seen a slight improvement, some aspects of it, but there are still some that just don't look great at all. Does it impact the gameplay though? I would say no. It's a very enjoyable game, and it's a shame really that they've released, it looking slightly less appealing, because the actual core gameplay is very fun. Not only do you have your colony, very settlers style colony, and you can send people out for different jobs, you have these heroes, I guess you'd call them, that are shown at the top of the screen, and they can perform multiple actions, and you can send those out into the overworld to perform missions for you. A really nice game, this. I do hope it sees maybe 1 or 2 more patches. The other issue here is the frame rate. Now, it's completely unlocked, so it can go over 30, under, and it really does. I wouldn't normally suggest this, but it might actually feel better to lock this one lower than 30, maybe lock it at 25, which is where it bottoms out, or tends to. For a strategy game, that might be the way to go. Now, having said that, it does tend to sit at around 30, but yeah, there are too many dips below for it to be, for it to be quite right. And they need to work a little bit more on the transition between the base and the overworld. The delay there is just a tiny bit too long. This one I think could use a little more work, but it's certainly perhaps had a bit of TLC since launch. Hopefully Paradox can put in a bit more time. Okay, so Apex Legends in the last update was actually quite impressive. I said it was now playable, and it is. It's really good. The gyro controls are solid. As you can see in the latest update, they've really ironed out that frame rate. I struggled to find any areas where the frame rate dipped below 30. Seems very solid in terms of frame pacing, and the image quality once again potentially looks slightly improved over the last patch. There are still some blurrier textures and blurrier areas, but generally for the size of the game, it's quite impressive. So yeah, Apex Legends continues to improve, and obviously you're constantly getting the new seasons, and there are some decent little storylines they throw into these. If you're after a game that's completely free that you can enjoy with a few pals, this is actually quite good. I like this game. A bit more work on image quality and we will be there. Last but not least then, we've got Ys 9. Now, I loved the game Ys 9, but when I reload to one of the worst problem area saves, it was this town here, and I was under the impression that it had been all patched up, but I don't agree, I'm afraid. If we look at the original game, we can see that, yeah, there are some real stutters, some real issues with performance, and maybe it's not as bad here, but it's still not great. It can't stick to 30 frames per second for love nor money, and as you can see, the fluctuations, it's like an ocean going up and down. Certainly more stable than it was before, but still, it's not quite there for me. This engine's looking remarkably dated now, but that's not, to be honest, not a huge issue for me, but performance is very important in a game that is focused around action and fast movements. It also struggles with frame pacing still, so there's some real stutters when you're doing certain things. Of all the games we've looked at today, I think this is the one that, well, one, it's not quite where I would like it to be in terms of performance, and two, I don't see it getting any more patches. Honestly, I just don't. If it does, then great, but yeah, personally, if I was going to get it, I'd be picking it up on another platform if I could. So that's it for today's All Patched Up episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's been of some use to you. As I say, really enjoy making these. So if you like watching them, let us know. And I'd like to make it at least one every 2 weeks would be ideal. If you have any games that you want revisited, please do pop a comment down below and let me know. Oh, and a big thanks to our patrons. You helped us get to over 100 Patreons, which has been a goal for quite a while now, and that's pretty epic. And all that's left to say is, for all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers, guys. See ya!